Wow, Marci, that was such a heartfelt episode with Harris. They just spoke so authentically about their process, and the work that he's doing is off the chain. So I'm so excited for everyone to listen to this episode.
Yes, they are really a remarkable individual. Been through a lot of the stuff and now bringing the healing tools, trying all kinds of stuff. I just love the way they spoke about it. Listen up, and then you can reach out and get and do some work with Harris if this really resonates for you. So little trigger warning, there's going to be some discussion of sexual trauma, of childhood trauma, some things that could be triggering for you. I encourage you to take care of yourself, but do listen to the episode and see if maybe there's some pearls in there for you. I think there will be.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Thank you for joining us again at the Warrior Parent Podcast. We're happy to have you here. And today we're going to be talking with Harris Eddie Hill, and whose pronouns are they and them, and is an out and proud non-binary podcaster, best-selling author, coach, and founder of the Center for Childhood Trauma Healing, which is a platform dedicated to supporting neurodivergent, queer, or highly empathic adults to overcome their relational trauma and begin to thrive. Shortlisted for the Positive Impact and Sustainability Speaker of the Year at the Speaker Awards, Harris is passionate about demystifying healing and helping people to connect to their own ability to heal. Clients take back their power from a medical system that doesn't always offer tangible solutions and doesn't always educate clients on their ability to heal. Harris has survived and overcome trauma, unaccepting family members, cancer, abusive relationships, physical paralysis, and mental health challenges, yet has found their way to emotional freedom and is now passing that power forward. What amazing work to be doing. Thank you for joining us, Harris. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to connect with you both, and I can tell this is going to be fun.
Yes.
Yes. Wow. So over the last couple of days, Harris, I was Googling you. You probably felt me like searching you, like I know everything about you. Not really, because you have a very big story, but I really relate to you. I also am a childhood trauma survivor, and that's why we do this work. That's why we do the podcast. That's why we have our nonprofit organization. And we're really about empowering our youth into being whatever they want to be. So with that, I want to hear more about your story as much as you're willing to share, so people get a sense of where you're coming from with this beautiful work. And then we'll talk a lot more about the work that you're doing.
Sure, for sure. I think it's a good place to start with the fact that I was not a popular kid at school. I was, at primary school. Here we attend primary school until you're about 11. And I was not one of the popular kids. I was one of the weird, eccentric ones. And, the actual academic stuff I found a bit too easy. I was bored a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the social stuff, I wasn't good at that. I didn't really learn to communicate even the basic effectiveness until I was, you can tell it from the words I just strung together that it's still not always a strong point. But I didn't quite get to grips with it properly until my 20s. So, and in amongst that, I've got relational trauma, so I didn't know how to relate in a healthy way. I had a lot of anxious attachment, disorganized attachment. I mean, basically, some of the other kids my age or a bit older, if their friendship or their romantic relationship hadn't worked out, they'd just be like, oh, it just didn't work out. And they were so cool and like calm about it. And they might have been a bit sad, but they took it so well. And I was like, oh, they like, to me at the time, they looked like psychopaths. I was like, don't you have any feelings? Because to me, the idea of a relationship or any kind of connection with another human being not working out was devastating to me. I
Yes.
couldn't conceive of that being a healthy and okay thing to happen. And
Because you had no reference point, no modeling.
yeah,
Is that it?
I think like a lot of people who've been through relational trauma or kind of insecure attachment from young,
Mm-hmm.
I was emotionally lonely for a large proportion of my life. And when you're emotionally lonely or emotionally starving, as I said to a client earlier today,
Mm.
every crumb of connection you can get, you take it. And the idea that you would have even less than you have now is really horrifying.
Oh my
Oh, wow.
goodness. Wow. Ouch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really insightful, how you put that.
Yeah. But when you've got all of your needs met and you're emotionally very fulfilled, you've got one connection out of 20. And I'm not talking about 20 best friends or anything, but when
Right,
Yeah.
you've got a good network.
right.
But when one kind of fails or reaches its natural conclusion and you're surrounded by all the others, you're still sad, but you're not, this isn't losing the only occasional fast food dinner in the middle of starvation. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
Yeah.
It
yeah,
becomes, it's like losing one meal a week when you know that every single other one is covered and it's good quality.
Yeah.
Like you'll survive. It's hard, but you'll
Yeah.
totally survive that.
yeah.
So what was your process for getting through all of this darkness and starting your healing path?
I think I'm really annoying, which is there's I think one of the things that was definitely done right in my upbringing was to encourage weirdness and to not kind of be
Uh-huh.
apologetic.
Mm,
And I think because I was able to access that and access a sense of mischief, I that carried me through when I didn't have anything else. It was a really good tool to have. And especially when it comes to medical folks or therapy or whatever, I'm not afraid to keep asking questions until I get my answer. And I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's a neurodivergent trait as well. I just need to
Mm-hmm.
understand what's happening. And so over the years, I kept saying to people, like, I need help with this. And they just look at me really weird or like, oh, that's really unfortunate because you're kind of screwed. That facial expression that people make. They're like, oh, I don't want to have to be the one to tell you that there's nothing we can do.
Wow.
And I just didn't
Yeah.
buy it. I was like,
Yeah.
if I know that at some point I wasn't particularly traumatized and then I was, then surely the reverse can happen. If you break a leg, yes, you'll have a healed fracture, but you can still fix it. You can still have a functional leg again. And I
Mhm.
was just convinced because I think there are certain aspects of being traumatized that are all day, every day. But I think a lot of it is not all day, every day. It's when
Mhm.
you see a news headline or you witness an argument between a couple in the street, you get triggered.
Mhm.
mhm.
So I was like, if I'm capable of being okay some of the time, I totally think that I could be okay again.
Mhm.
And all of the traditional folks were like, well, no, I had one CBT practitioner tell me, well, you'll always have anxiety. And I was like, thanks.
No
I
kidding.
I just paid you $200 for that too. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is very interesting because I have heard this idea that, you don't get out of these things. But for me, I'm thinking you're believing in yourself and your ability to get better. And the fact that professionals are basically telling you, no, that's not going to happen. Heartbreaking, not right, not professional, not real, because who knows better than you? And I feel like the fact that you had that knowledge, you had that belief that you could be better, that's like 80% of the journey is that you knew you could be better versus someone when you lose that hope, when you don't even have it, that's such a dark place to be. So for you to have that and then be told, no, no, this is, you're not going to
Yeah.
recover from this from people who are supposed to be out there helping you. That's pretty devastating to
It
hear.
is, and I think I'm a very determined person. Even if something takes me years, I know I will get there eventually because I can't not. I'm tenacious to
Yes.
probably to a fault. And so I
Excellent
think,
quality.
yeah, I think so. And I think that's one of the reasons that I'll try not to get on my soapbox, but
No, no, go ahead.
I I think I feel very, very strongly. The therapy industry is changing and it's
Yeah.
great.
Mm.
EMDR is having a bit of a surge at the moment, which
Yes.
is a great place to start,
Yes.
but it's not the whole picture. And I
No.
think people like me who are willing to push the boundaries and be as well self-governed as we possibly can, whilst kind of really carefully treading this line of responsibility and kind of radical help for our clients. It's our work that's going to inform the mainstream later.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I have to say, I was just before you said that, that was spinning in my mind thinking the same thing. Like the therapy, like you said, you're giving them credit for coming forward, but they have a long way to go. I was telling Marci, I just watched the film on Netflix, Will and Harper. Have you seen?
Oh, I watched it the day it
Oh,
came out. I loved
oh
it
my God.
so
We were
much.
crying and crying, but the part about the therapist who came to them, it was later in the film, but the therapist was feeling really upset because someone who had been trans had come to them. Now, this was 20 years ago, had come to them and basically said, yeah, no, like you just need to, it's just thoughts. Like
Yeah,
that's not really true, and pushed it away.
Dismiss
And
them.
Harper had had the same experience. Now that was 20 years ago, right? We understand that it takes a long time for these processes to happen. And Marci,
mm,
that's why we push so hard for so much of this knowledge around the youth, because they just have a knowing about it. But it takes someone like you who's going to force the issue,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And I think so. I had simple PTSD as a result of sexual trauma. There
Mm,
was a one-off incident when I was 10. There was a series of incidents with an abusive partner in my teens, and then there was another one-off when I was in my 20s, which was longer ago than a lot of people assume. But there you go.
yeah.
And I knew I had PTSD from that. I knew that from a young age. When I was maybe 11 or 12, I heard about PTSD and I was like, oh, that's what I have. It was just really easy for me to identify.
Mm,
Mhm.
And I processed that in 2 sessions. And when I don't mean talking about it, we did this whole kind of visualization experience where I
yeah.
went back to the first
So
incident.
you did a rewire, right? It
Yes.
sort of
Yeah,
Well,
bypass the
processing it.
trauma. Yes.
the way that so we went back, my practitioner and I went back to the morning after the very first incident when I was 10 years old, had that
Hmm.
conversation, adults aren't supposed to do this, it's not your fault, etc., etc.
Hmm.
And it was really profound, but it wasn't triggering because we weren't actually dealing with the thing that happened, but we were helping the story to move on emotionally. Like I was
Yes.
so emotionally engaged, and that's, we are emotional beings before we're anything else. So if you can kind
Yes.
of stick on a really genuine emotional experience to the end of that,
Yeah.
then your brain can like move forward. It finishes off the memory, and that's how I describe it. And
Yeah.
Yes.
since then, I've heard other people in this space talk about, oh well, you just learn to live with your triggers. And I'm
No.
like, no,
No,
you
no,
can you
no,
can
no, no.
I'm like,
No.
and there's, I've met some fairly influential people in the trauma space who
Hmm.
don't literally don't they don't know what trauma healing
Mhm.
is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, because they're like, oh, what happens when you have a relapse? I'm like, I don't have one. I literally have never had a single one, not a nightmare, not a flashback,
Right.
nothing,
Yeah.
Because you
nothing.
dealt with it, you went back and allowed it to process. And that's something we talk about a lot, is
Yeah.
that you got to go there sometimes. It's the way, you've heard the only way out of it is through it. And I'm I think it's really heartening for people to hear that you went back 10 years later and were able to do that work and process that in a way that felt safe because you had the right practitioner to do it with, to feel safe, to hear what you needed to hear, which unfortunately you didn't hear 10 years ago. And most people don't necessarily get that right after their trauma and be able to process it so that you can move forward. It's
I
important.
I did a lot of that work myself, and it was not one or two times, but a lot of the work was with NLP, so neuro linguistic programming.
I'm trained in that as well.
Oh my gosh, that
So
was
good.
amazing, amazing. But it is full on rewire, and I did it for about 2 years because of the level of trauma.
Yeah.
So I want to speak to that because you talk about, and we're talking about it now, but you talk about treating trauma permanently.
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to then? Because
Yeah.
most people like will say, yeah, no, 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 no. Like it's always, it lives in your cells and all the things, right? So talk about that.
Yeah, so it's not that it never happened. It's not like in Men in Black where
Right.
they flash you in the eyes and then
Right,
you just
right,
have
Yeah.
no recollection of it.
Right.
right. That's the push down. That's like smushing
Yeah.
it down. That's not
It's
processing
more
it.
the thing is that to geek out for a moment, trauma is just an unprocessed, unfinished memory. When we go to bed at night, I don't know if you like the Inside Out movies, but like they're my
Mhm.
favorites.
Yeah.
When you go to bed at night, all of your memories from the day, all of that gets all kind of sorted out at night time. And then when you wake up in the morning, you kind of start with a clean slate. Some of it's gone into long-term memory, some of it's just binned because you don't need it.
Hmm.
But with trauma, it's such a big thing that hasn't been processed properly at the time that it happened. It stays in the present.
Mhm.
Yes.
And so with the simple PTSD, that's like, oh, I was in that accident or that one-off thing happened, or
Yes.
maybe like me, it was a few different incidents over time, but it was the same thing.
Hmm.
So essentially all you're doing is actually sorting that trauma that's kind of still in the present part of your brain. And we knew this, like my industry knew this before they proved it with science. So because of how it presented. So once
Hmm.
you've processed that the same way that you would process even what you had for breakfast, obviously it's a slightly different thing
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's a lot more emotions. But once you've done that, then it just goes into long-term memory. So when I think back to that stuff, I know that it was real, and if I'm called to do so, I can talk about it in detail, and it's just a fact of
Mhm.
what happened. It's not
Mhm.
upsetting in the same
Yes.
way. With complex trauma, it's a little bit different because complex trauma is any less than ideal environment you've lived in over a prolonged period of time. So that's where you start to become hypervigilant. If somebody's stumbling to get the key in the door, you're like, they're drunk, you know.
Yeah, all your senses are heightened. Like
Yeah.
my kids could never sneak in the house. I could smell everything. Like everything is turned on overdrive. But then what
Yeah.
happens with the hypervigilant is it shuns your system down because you're working on overtime, overload all the time.
Yes.
So you're
Yeah.
swimming in cortisol. And so
Mm.
for me, I hadn't processed it. I had 30 years of therapy, but hadn't processed all of it in this way, just talk therapy basically, and that wasn't working. So I eventually had a crash. Became very, very sick, couldn't get out of bed. Nobody could figure out what was going on. And now my body had kept the score of all those years of
Yeah.
trauma.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that survival mode is what you're describing. And you need that. Like that's such an important thing. It's just not meant to be switched on permanently and over many
Exactly.
years. A week
Yes.
maybe, but
Yeah.
not like that.
Yeah.
So, and also living in an environment where you develop complex trauma, it means the person that I'm laughing with 1 minute might be angry the next minute. It begins to actually influence how you develop as a human being. And that's where
Yes.
often anxiety comes in, because you can have anxiety for sort of chemical reasons, but the emotional side of anxiety disorder says, if I can think of enough outcomes, I can avoid most of the risk.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yes.
And
I have seen that
yeah,
with people,
so
that idea
that's
that they're always coming up with an exit strategy or
yeah,
things.
yeah. So that's a big trauma response. And like you were saying, Debbie, talk therapy talk therapy can really help. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people have had really good talk therapists,
Yes.
but for trauma in the long run, if you're sort of in a place where you want to actually heal from it. It's not
Yeah.
going to be that in my experience.
Yeah. There's no thriving there. It's just surviving the days, right?
Yeah.
And being on autopilot and living your
Yeah.
life that way. But for me, it became essential because I had children, and I was just so incredibly determined that would never be their life, that they would
Yeah.
never know that ever.
Yeah.
And so I continued to do a lot of physical kind of crazy healing because of the cell damage, right? And I'm determined to make sure that Marci always talks about healing generations forward and generations back by doing this work. And that's what keeps me going. That's what gets me out of bed every
Yeah.
day. I'm sure
Yeah.
you feel the same way. You do this, you have your own center for childhood trauma healing. Tell us about that, because this must be how you heal every day, is by doing this beautiful work. Is that true?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I think it's been a borderline obsession for me to learn about this stuff, because there's so much that I didn't experience growing up or I didn't know about. And now I'm getting to do it as an adult. And that to me is so exciting.
Yes.
And in my work with my trauma clients, and it's all online, by the way, I don't like leaving the house, and only on my own time, but I like it. Working online is like an instant thing, and I just find that for me, for my nervous system, I really lean into gentleness as much as I can,
Yeah.
or as much as is necessary. So I work online with people, and obviously they're bringing their stories to me, and so far it doesn't matter how severe a story I'm hearing, they always say, oh, I feel a bit silly. So it wasn't really that bad, was it? And I'm like, oh, wow. Nobody, it doesn't matter how severe your story is, everyone thinks, oh, someone else has it worse.
Yes.
Which is so interesting to me.
Yes.
Right, that
Or
idea that we think we have to rate our trauma or our
yeah.
discomfort or whatever, and that we have to, like, we don't deserve to feel bad about it, rather than
Yeah.
wherever we are,
Yeah.
that we get
Or
to
we've just
experience it.
completely normalized it, right? We just think that's
Yeah.
normal. Like, didn't everyone grow up like this?
Yeah.
Right? That's what I thought. Like,
Yeah. Same.
right? I thought this is just the way you do it.
Yeah. Well, I guess you don't know any different. So, some people will tell me a story and I'll have my very professional poker face on.
Yeah.
But inside I'm like, bloody hell.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. That's
yeah.
And then at the end, so they're like, so I don't, sometimes they'll be like, oh, I don't even really know why it still bothers me. And I'm like, what you've just shared is quite a big deal. It's quite significant. And if you weren't reacting the way that you're reacting now, I actually would be a bit worried about you.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
actually, your response and what you're saying and how you feel seems to be actually a really sane and appropriate response. And they're like, oh, okay. And I think the healing part for me, because I think it doesn't matter how boundaried you are, or I view everybody as whole. I don't believe in brokenness. I think that's BS. I don't believe in that. I personally think that trauma responses, if you've got really strong trauma responses, it's actually a sign that you have a very effective brain. That's what I feel. But I think the part that I do really get from my work is that I'm in space with people. We understand each other in the broadest sense. And I think that for me is the magical part, because at no point when people are telling their story does it make me feel like I'm going through it with them. It's more that we're just two completely capable, like, whole human beings who are kind of there to collaborate together and create some healing that will have a knock-on effect on everyone around us. So
yeah, that's it. We talk about that all the time, how it spreads out. That's part of that healing process. I'm curious, and I feel like people listening will be curious. So first of all, so you're in the UK, but you're working with people in other countries, or you're open to if you're not? And so
absolutely.
what's it look like if someone decides, well, I want to look into working with Harris? Like, what can people expect, and number of, appointments, or how you do it, just to give them an idea of something that could be a typical way for them?
Sure. It really depends. If you've already been therapied up to your eyeballs and you just want to process the big chunks of trauma and just to kind of get over the big chunks of it,
Mhm.
then I can work with some people for 90 days. And during that time, it's really concentrated. So I might give them homework of sort of audio books or regular books, or challenges to kind of ground what we've learned and the
Yes.
feelings that we've had. And so as an
Yes.
example, if someone's like, oh, I avoid intimacy, then we might talk about, for the next week, I want you to share something about, like, maybe I'm feeling this, and just name an emotion to somebody else. It might start there. So we deal with the real chunky bits in 90 days, but that's not for everyone. If people are at a phase where they haven't done much therapy, they haven't really got on with therapy, and they might need a bit more time, then they might work with me on a sort of pay-as-you-go basis and
Mhm.
come every week to 2 weeks. And I've also had other clients who've turned up and said, I want a year of your time, and I want us to throw everything in and the kitchen sink at this issue. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love your approach, because so many times it just goes on and it goes on and it goes on, right? And that was sort of my case, but nobody knew any different then. But this idea is that you're really focused on the root cause, the trauma, and then just moving past it. Like, okay,
Yeah.
let's just get on with life. We're not going to
Yeah.
sit in our shit for 2 or 3 or 10 years. Like, we're going head on.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the thing. I think if you've not experienced anything that actually treats trauma, this sounds, I've had a lot of very understandable skepticism of people saying, like, this sounds like a scam. And I'm like, oh, I wish you could feel how genuine this is, and also understand that I'm not the only one saying this. Like, a lot of other people in my industry also do this, and it's also relatively quick.
Yes.
And I've also tried out lots of different things as a client, as a recipient, and I'll give anything a go. I don't mind how it goes. I trust that I'll get through it. And so I've tried EMDR, I've tried all these different types of things just to see what I think works best, and depending on the person. And so it's not just a job, it's also been my story, and it's also, I'm quite happy to be a guinea pig and then sort of feed back the results to my clients and
Yeah.
say, like, oh, this is how this feels and this is how it
Yeah.
works. And
That's what makes it so genuine and authentic. You've mentioned EMDR a few times. Can you just give a brief description for anyone who's listening who doesn't really know what that is?
yeah, so I'm gonna
Yes,
butcher
eye
this. I
eye
was
movement, desensitization,
and I forget the R. I always forget.
response.
Rapid,
Hang
isn't it?
on. Let's do it properly.
All right. Or we
Okay.
could just keep guessing. That'll be fun.
Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. There you go. I knew
Okay.
it was one of those. I couldn't
Yes.
remember which one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to describe it how it was for me when I've tried
Mhm.
it. It's quite a clinical and a almost like a mechanical way of processing trauma. So for some people, it's exactly what works for them, and I really encourage it if it really works for you. And it's a series of prompts where, as an example, I tried it out for a little bit of driving trauma that I had for a very close, a near accident. I managed not to hit this other car, but I got whiplash and concussion, and then developed some PTSD around driving after that. So I tried it out for that. I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. And we started off with, like, the main image that I had in my mind of that night of when it happened. And it was literally just it was like in the dark, and my car headlights were like lighting up the grass along the verge of the road. So we started there, and we noticed the feeling, and then did some eye movements, and then what image or feeling or whatever is coming up next, do some eye movements, and you just kind of work your way through it, and you have an idea of where you want to end up. You should get to a point where your brain has processed enough of the images and the feelings that you get to a point where the next thing that comes out of your mouth is positive. We test it a bit, and then that's usually a sign that your brain has done the thing that it needs to do. So it was helpful in helping me with my driving trauma. But first of all, it felt surgical. It felt like a thing that was, EMDR felt like a thing that was happening to me that I didn't have any emotional relationship with. It was a very mechanical, very logical thing.
Yeah.
And I felt that the rewiring, so in a lot of the other types of healing that I've been a part of and that I offer, is very much about involving those sort of your inner child and the different parts of you, like IFS. I'm a massive fan of IFS, and it's you're very present. You're really half of the conversation, the healing conversation.
Yeah.
You're talking to different parts of yourself that is scared or didn't have the support at the time or whatever it might be. You're very present. EMDR didn't give me that. And so whilst I don't have big PTSD reactions to driving now, the positive other side of that wasn't there for me in such a big way as it is with the other types of work that I do, when you're more emotionally present and it's more of an organic thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
I felt like, so if that's all you can get, I still really encourage it. I didn't think it was the most gentle, I didn't think it was the most organic, and I didn't think it was the most present way of doing it.
So Marci and I have a nonprofit organization called Cour Experience. So we teach heart tools. So we do heart brain coherence, EFT tapping, meditation, like lots of tools. We actually have an app that teaches some of these things. So we're all about the tools for sure.
Yeah. And
But-
bilateral tapping, which is one of the
bilateral
ones
tapping,
that we do, is based on EMDR, much simplified.
Yes.
But one of the things we always say to people is find what works for you.
Yeah.
So it might be this one and that one, and a little of this and a little of that, and oh, that doesn't really work for me. I'm not a meditator, or yoga is not my thing, but I love the EFT, or I love the bilateral tapping or heart brain, and because we're all different, we're all unique. So trying different things in combinations. And I love that you're saying you're open, you're going to try anything, because being open to it is a big part of it. You're not going in with this will never work. I mean, it still might work, but much better to be open and allow something to happen.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I'm afraid we're running out of time. I could talk to Harris all day.
It's getting late for Harris
I
out there
know.
in the UK. It's morning for us, but
So how do people get a hold of you, Harris?
Yeah.
People who want to do this beautiful work.
Sure. So best place to start is my website, which is mxharrishill.com, MX Harris with a double R, Hill with a double L.com. If you want to talk to me more, you can book a consultation through there. And I've also got a quiz on there, like a questionnaire, to find out if you have relational trauma or what your relational health score is. So you can just go and take that on. It's like right at the top.
Awareness is the first step, we always say.
Yes.
We're going to post all your links in our show notes. So if people didn't catch that, you can go to the show notes and find it. So great to talk to you, Harris. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, and what a lovely space you two have created.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now for your core mental health break. This is your opportunity to take a moment to support your mental wellness, your peace of mind, your own ease and grace. Take some time every day to support your mental health. You deserve it, and it matters.
Today we're going to try a little taste of bilateral tapping. So begin by pressing your arms over your chest so that each hand is on the opposite shoulder. And then just tap one side and then the other. Tap on the right, tap on the left. Easily, gently, going back and forth. Breathe deeply. If you like, you can allow your eyes to close. And just stay in this tapping rhythm for as long as feels good to you. This will help to calm your nervous system and bring you to a place of center. And you can use it any time that you're feeling a little anxious or unsure about something. For a more in-depth version of bilateral tapping, you can check out our Core Tools platform or app. Thank you for pausing for yourself today. Your mental health is important, and you deserve peace, calm, and ease in your life every day. So please choose to receive it. It is always available right at your center, your heart, your core.
Stay well, friends. Thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast, which is a production of our nonprofit, Cour Experience, who also creates and distributes Cour tools. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our Cour Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. We want to thank Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the producers, or the financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. Thanks for listening. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.